Elmira Bayrasli, come on up to the stage. How about a hand for Elmira? And we need to get you a microphone.
Yes.
And then I'll let you bring your panel up. Does that sound okay?
That sounds really good.
Okay, excellent.
Okay, thank you so much, Alan. Good afternoon, everyone.
Hi,
All
Elmira.
Right. Hi. Okay, I'm going to bring up the energy level here because I've got plenty, and I know that we tend to get a little sleepy after lunch. But we're going to have a really good discussion here about experience in Silicon Valley. I know that I spend most of my time in New York, and Silicon Valley is kind of this Valhalla, this place, this nirvana place that everybody talks about, and especially in the startup world, and everybody talks about replicating it. But what are the myths and realities of it? And we have a really great panel here to talk about that. So I'm going to ask my panelists to come up. We've got Devrim from Coding. Give a round of applause to Devrim. We've got Emre from Groups. And we've got Dilaver from Yonca Media Group. Great. So, all three of you have kind of transplanted yourselves into Silicon Valley. Which is, I think, a good perspective because people always want to know how do I break into Silicon Valley. But I think one thing that I want to start off with is what is Silicon Valley? I mean, can you really tell me about what is this place that everybody talks about? Devrim, you want to start?
Yes, I will talk about Silicon Valley being here 2004 to 2006, and then I moved to Silicon Valley. I started a company here in Istanbul, and then moved to Silicon Valley. A benchmark, I think what I found in Silicon Valley is the culture of investment and startups, and valuing a startup, valuing an entrepreneur greatly, not like some entrepreneurs think themselves a little less than the money owners. In Silicon Valley, you just find this difference that if you have an idea and if it works, then you have the choice of investors because they just come and contact you. It's more inbound than you actually pitch yourself to them. And the second thing I found is there is no pretending. Everybody is real. You wouldn't know who's an investor, who's a developer, and who's just working there. You just are yourself. You just present yourself. You go, hey, this is what I'm doing, and then they will, introduce themselves the same way. I think that's the main difference. You don't present yourself as, hey, I am the owner of this company, or nobody says like, hey, I have this much money or something. Like that's not there. Or where you come from, what do you believe in? It's just is irrelevant. What you do is the question they ask, and if you do a great thing, you will find great people.
Oh, that's an interesting point, because I always talk about this when talking about people in New York. I really get annoyed. People always ask me, what do you do? And they want to define you by kind of what your profession is, but I always say it's who you want to be and kind of what you're involved in. So that's an interesting distinguisher.
Yeah, I think in Europe, I was in Holland before I came to Istanbul. I was there for 4 years. The question they ask in Europe is, where do you come from? How is that relevant, right? Like, it just starts from there. And then it's like, okay, I'm from Turkey. Oh, you don't look like other Turkish people. Like dude, what exactly do you mean by that? Like, it just doesn't, it's not the subject that I want to discuss with you, how I compare to the rest of my people, right? Like, that just doesn't start from there. In San Francisco, it almost is totally irrelevant. You just don't even hear, or you don't even think that they're thinking about that. It's just, what do you do? For me, it means, what do you contribute back to the society? If your contribution is large, then you get respect, regardless of where you come from or what you believe in.
Emre, before you take a drink of your water, I don't want you to have a Mark Rubio moment. What's your perspective? How do you see it?
I agree with Devrim. Everything he says. I think there's no entitlement in Silicon Valley, and I mean, it's not comparable to anywhere else. So, I mean, it's a nice place to be. It's full of, there are a lot of investors. There's a very vibrant entrepreneurship and startup ecosystem. So it's more than just a geographic place. It's a place where all these things happening, technology is happening. Yeah.
And speaking of technology, now Dilaver, you started at Yahoo and then segued into kind of the entrepreneurial sphere. Can you talk a little bit about what your perspective of Silicon Valley is?
So I've had this interesting perspective of working in big companies in the Valley. I started out at Siebel System, which was acquired by Oracle, the original CRM maker, before Salesforce.com came on the scene. And then I was at SAP and Yahoo, and then came to what I call the bleeding edge entrepreneurship, which is to run a company out of Turkey. And as you can tell, I'm not of Turkish origin. My perspective is, I think I would agree with some of the points made earlier, but I do feel that it's very important to lay it out there. The Silicon Valley is no nirvana. It is not this absolute ideal place that we often idolize outside the United States. It's very much what we make of it, and I think it is true of a lot of places. So first of all, I would say you're not missing much if you're not there, because you could do a lot of things that are happening there by having the similar attitude. So to answer your question, my view is Silicon Valley is really about the state of mind, and the state of mind has been evolving. I mean, the Valley was built over 50 years after this ecosystem that's been built up through academia, Stanford, Berkeley, and other places, and then a bunch of companies that made it big. And then the value chain has been exploding from semiconductor all the way to now consumer web. But it has had the need to constantly evolve. We've had big booms and huge busts. You want to go and ask the entrepreneurs how they felt about the bust, you wouldn't hear a lot of the nice things. So it is true that pedigree is less important. It is true it is very international. It is true it is very accepting. It is true it is accepting of failure. But it also has, it is its weaknesses. And in some ways, it's sort of coming of age now that the industry is, almost 20, 30 years old. So that's my perspective. The key takeaway is it's something that is very much evolving as we speak.
I'm glad that you brought up the state of mind, because I think that plays a huge part. Because as you just said, Silicon Valley it's been operating for 30 years, and in the morning we heard the investors say, Silicon Valley wasn't born overnight, and so, for a market like Turkey, there's still going to be time to grow. But there is a certain culture and a mindset that has allowed Silicon Valley to survive, and I would even argue thrive and expand. And I think we are seeing the ripple effects, the domino effects of Silicon Valley expanding now. And I know that while we were preparing for this panel, Devrim, you brought up the point about culture. And this culture that's in Silicon Valley that I think a lot of people don't really see. Can you talk a little bit about what that is?
I felt uncomfortable with that one. Silicon Valley.
You look good with it.
This one? This
yeah,
one? Okay,
absolutely.
on the next question. I recommend everybody to just get a plane ticket and go to San Francisco, live there for a month. With don't plan anything. Just go there and live there for a month. And you will see how people stop at stop signs and how they respect the pedestrians crossing the roads and stuff that you don't see here. And spend some time with entrepreneurs in San Francisco. Sometimes people come to visit me at the office, and then we have a TechCrunch article, and then there's this guy who just did an exit, and then we meet him over lunch, and then you're like, hey, congratulations. And we just closed the Series B funding last month, and then my first Series B board meeting, after that I get a call from a friend, hey, are you still the CEO? Those are the kind of things that makes the culture. And when you meet with your board members, I remember how it was when I was in Istanbul. It was more like this guy coming with this expensive car and other stuff around it. It's just this heavy duty thing. But in San Francisco, I have my T-shirt and my Snickers. Probably this is how I look and how I work. And it just, you don't do this. But I was looking at Mark Zuckerberg and his slippers. When I was in Istanbul, I was like, how is this even possible? Is he pretending? Is he trying to be cool? No, it's actually how he is. And he just doesn't change it because he's front of the cameras right at this moment. And when you incorporate that, digest that culture and you become one of them, it just, it just gives you the energy to do good without thinking about, I need to buy a car, I need to buy this, I need to, act or be seen like this. It just, pure focus on what you are doing. I think that's what it comes down to.
That's interesting, the kind of the carefree being who you are. I mean, it sounds as if what you're really getting at is it's really about the relationships that you build and the networking. And Emre, I know that you brought groups over and are operating out of San Francisco. Can you talk a little bit about how you did that and how you established those networks?
Sure. Actually, yeah, I start groups in San Francisco, in Palo Alto, and then we always kept an office in Istanbul as well. The things are, I mean, there are lots of differences between Silicon Valley and Turkey. I mean, culturally, just like Devrim said, but also, you know, on the corporate level, also there are lots of differences. For example, stock options is not something we're familiar in Turkey. And that changes many things. I mean, the employees are much more motivated if they feel like they own the company, and stock options just provide that. Our legal system doesn't allow. I mean, the legal system in Turkey doesn't allow that, and that's really bad. And apart from that, in Silicon Valley, for example, hiring, firing, they're both much easier. Here, if you fire someone, it's a lot costly to you, and it's like a bad thing, but it just means you guys. I mean, the company and the employees are not good fits, and it's very understandable in Silicon Valley. And I mean that's the essence of a startup too. I mean you have to be able to fire and hire easily. Because you have to hire. I mean, you have to hire the best, and if it doesn't work, you have to be able to fire fast.
Have you been in that situation?
Oh yeah.
And how is that? I mean, can you tell? I mean, I think that's one of the challenges of being in a startup is I think people don't want to fire people. I mean, how do you go about doing that?
Well, it's hard, of course. It's definitely not sweet, but I mean, it's a decision you have to make as a CEO, and if things are not, it doesn't mean that the employee is bad. Or it doesn't mean that the company is, bad. It just means that you don't fit each other, and you both have things to learn. Yeah, we went through that, and it hasn't been simple, but you get used to it.
Okay, I'm going to recommend Burak put a panel on how to fire people for next time, because I think that would be an interesting point. Dilaver, can you talk a little bit about your experience in terms of kind of the investment, because you are involved in that side of it. And I think one question that people have is, if I'm a startup and I have to be in the Valley, I mean, but how do you get there? I mean, Devrim talked about just getting there, but how do you actually create those networks? How do you get onto Sand Hill Road?
Well, I think it's a great question, and for a lot of you in the room who are looking to seek investments around the world, not just in the Valley, but also in Europe, I think it comes down to relationships. At the end of the day, investors, or I would say good investors, thoughtful investors, invest in people. They certainly invest in ideas, but we've seen a lot of people screwing up great ideas because they didn't know what to do with them. They didn't know how to execute. And that is something that's often not mentioned with as much an emphasis in our region as it should be, because we've had a different journey as an ecosystem. But relationships are very important. That's why you see the same PayPal mafia investing in the same group of people, because people have worked with each other, they're comfortable, they know what their strengths are. So that's, the number one thing would be doing exactly what we're doing over here, which is why I give Burak Buyukdemir incredible credit for what he has done, because it brings people together. You're developing relationships with folks who were on the stage before us from the investing community. That is critical. And second thing I would say is, and I'm going to digress a little bit on this, Almira, is that you have to build your credibility with the investing community then to make sure that you are in that circle. Even if, let's say, you engage with somebody and you don't get an investment, keep in touch. Share with them what's going on, how your business is progressing. And by the way, if it did not work out, why it didn't work out? It's okay. I mean, we all have heard this. Failure is part of the journey. There is nothing wrong with that. So I think we need to make sure we're very thoughtful as aspiring entrepreneurs in building those relationships, developing credibility with the investing community. Money will follow. I'm actually a huge believer. Money is not the biggest problem. I mean, that's what everybody makes it seem like, especially in our part of the world, that it's all, we don't have enough money around. Well, we have destroyed a lot of money too in the Valley. Billions of dollars are destroyed every year in value. At the end of the day, and a lot of companies that grew big, often bootstrapped, it comes down to you and your execution. So, but to come back to your point, it's about relationships. It's about navigating those and then making sure that you're developing credibility and you are keeping in touch with those folks and sharing with them your results.
I'm glad that you brought up the investing and the relationships, because I always, when I tell people about, people want to understand Silicon Valley, and I say it's a lot like dating. So you have to play a little hard to get in order for them to be interested in you. And then you really have to learn how to navigate that. And Devram, we were talking a little bit about the mistakes that people from the outside make in terms of coming into Silicon Valley, where they feel like, oh, someone's interested in my company, and so I'm going to go all in on this. And can you talk a little bit about how to navigate that?
That's part of Silicon Valley culture too. I will extend it on that. And I've been talking to some entrepreneurs here, and I've been hearing like, but what if I turn this investor off by trying to be picky? Like, what if, like, just a reference check would be fine, but then in Turkey, people are like, the entrepreneurs are in defensive mode. They were like, I should probably do what they ask of me. And I beg everyone, please don't take money from the person who treats you like that. Do not. Because I did that in 2005, and I'm not going to call any names or anything, just to give you my experience and how I ended up in Silicon Valley, is that the investor that I found in Turkey took my company down, and my 5 years that I spent on that project was gone. It's been taken away from me. It's like we took the investment, and then he was like, I want more than 50% of the company. I'm like, all right, okay, so you're putting in $1.5 million, so probably that's good. It's 2006. I didn't know. I was 26, and we just signed those agreements, and then out of blue, he was like, I'm not in this anymore. If this happens in Silicon Valley, it's never heard of, by the way. Like, it doesn't happen that an investor says in the middle of the way, I just pull out. It happened to me. Since that $1.5 million was never put in our bank account, that also meant that was his company, which actually was mine. It was my idea. I brought it up to the investment stage. And when he pulled out, I thought he would release the shares and let me go and do a next round. Like, that's what would happen in Silicon Valley. He didn't. He said, yes, I would release the shares, I will give the company back and everything. Then I couldn't get a hold of him for 6 months that I had to pay my savings to the 25 people we hired in Ukraine. I started my journey because of that, and thanks to that, with $3,500 in New York alone. So this coding started after that. So I was like, I'm not going to stay in this country. I'm fed up. I can't do this. And that's the advice I want to give to everyone. Like, please check your investor. If he, like, ask who he invested in, and ask me about this offline. I'll tell you. And just make sure that you're not accepting money just because it's money. You are actually hiring that person to your board. Are you sure you can stand him, like when in a board meeting, when he gives you stupid advice? Like, if he tells you, why don't you put banner ads to your emails? Like, can you stand that kind of advice? Recruit your investor. And if you can't, don't take his money, because he's going to just make your life miserable. And it actually applies to San Francisco too. There are lots of investors that are not good for you. Even you come to San Francisco, I will give you the same advice. If he doesn't understand your business, if he doesn't have a single clue how you can grow that, and if he cannot provide you a single introduction as to how you grow your business, don't take his money. You don't need it. We didn't take any money. Like, when we started coding, since we were burned, my brother and I, we said, let's do something you and I can do. We do not need any single dime from anybody, and this is a business that we can make and we can grow. And 2 years later, Google sent us an email and saying that, hey, this is great, can we use it in our national ad campaign? And then investors came and we want to invest money. And that was great. Now my board member is a developer, also is an investor. So he comes to the board meeting, he's like, hey, dude, Java is cool. And I'm like, yes, this is my guy.
Great.
So that's the advice I'm going to give the first part, and very shortly the second part. I'm seeing that a lot of entrepreneurs here thinking, how much I can ask, given the circumstances. We are in Turkey, there are not enough investors, and money is expensive. And then they go like, yeah, 100,000 will be fine. It's not fine. It's not even enough for you two co-founders. Don't think that you will work on 500 liras a month and you will live under the bridge and you will not eat anything until this is done. It is just not how these things work. When you hire somebody, you have to, like that developer, if he's hired by Doğan Holding or Google, they will pay him $60,000 a year, and then you will start with them, you will pay him half. He will be fine in the 3 months and 6 months, and when his wife says, hey, dude, what are you doing? Then Doğan Holding takes him back, and you are in the middle of your process, and you're done.
So basically what you're saying is do evaluation of your company on day one.
Yeah, exactly, and have a realistic expectation. That's what happens in San Francisco. If you go to an investor, it's like, hey, 50K will be fine. It's actually a little Turkish culture, right? Like, yeah, we will make it. We'll manage. No, there is nothing like that. You will just put your salary down. Okay, make it a little modest, and then put co-founder salary down and say, I need 2 more people. Put like 50K each. You need 200K a year. And when you are asking for an investment, you're asking for 2 years. This is the norm in San Francisco. You are going to get to the next stage of your company, whatever it is, 1 million users or profitability in 2 years. If it's 200K times 2, 400K is the money you need. Nothing less, nothing more. So put that down and be realistic of your expectations. If it doesn't happen in Turkey, just let us know, and we'll connect you with folks that can make that happen. We will help you. But it's just that this realistic expectations and reference checking your investor is crucial. Don't do without these 2 things.
I'm going to have Dilaver, I'm going to have you chime in on this, and then I'll get to you. But I also want to be able to open up to questions. So after I ask Emre, I'm going to, if you guys want to, if you have any thoughts that you want to ask this panel, I'll come around. I'm going to be Oprah, and I'll hand the mic around to you guys. But Dilaver, do you want to dovetail on what Devrim was saying?
Devrim covered quite a bit. So I want to make sure that I focus on it. What part would you like me to elaborate on?
Let's just pick it up on what you think is most interesting to this audience to take away in terms of things that they should be watching out. People, yes, you want to dive into Silicon Valley, but people talk about the great things about Silicon Valley, and they talk about how there's this investment and there's all this creativity and there's all this innovation. But what are the minefields? What do people actually need to look out for and be aware of?
That's why, I've spent 15 years there, and that's why I started out by saying Silicon Valley is not a nirvana, it's not a utopia, it's not what we often think it is. And yes, certainly has a lot of good things about it, and we are adopting parts of it. So I think I totally agree with what Devrim was saying. I would just add to it that, again, to his point, that you're looking at your investor as your partner for the long run. And there are VCs and there are VCs, and you want to just make sure that these are folks you can do business with, and you can hopefully have a longer-term partnership. I went back to the PayPal mafia example. Those folks have spawned so many companies, and it's been a journey, and it's because the relationships go beyond just one company. So I would do that homework very carefully. Also, just some basic checks to see if this investor has invested in this particular sector, in this particular category. How did they go about it? What became of that? What were their role? Are they more operating focused, or they're sort of step back? Like in our case, Tiger is a great investor, but frankly they're not very hands-on, and that's fine, and it works out. But
right, you want to have an investor that has value add, that's going to actually contribute.
Has a value add
right.
in the fact that they are a global investor. They have a huge network. We've been able to do business because of just showing up in their network, right? But it is not an investor, unlike Sequoia Capital, where you have people who are domain experts, and they actually have, they were entrepreneurs, exit and became partners, and they know how a consumer company runs. Unlike that, Tiger is a hedge fund at its core, so a lot of investing professionals have more of a financial sector background. They're not operating, so they rely on us pretty much on what to do. I still get incredible support, but I at least know that walking in, right? If there is somebody out here who needs a lot of hand-holding, then I would say maybe you should talk to a different investor. And that's why Tiger doesn't do seed investment, because seed investment, especially in emerging markets, required lots of mentorship, lots of hand-holding. So again, it depends on your sector, it depends where you are in your journey, what you're looking for, but those are all the things you should consider, and happy to talk about that offline as well.
Great. Emery, you've had experience both in Turkey and in San Francisco, and there are a lot of people that actually can't get to San Francisco. And I recently heard Martin Varshevsky, who is an Argentine entrepreneur. He started a company called Fawn in Spain. He's gotten a lot of investments from Silicon Valley, and when he went to Silicon Valley, they said, well, when are you going to come here and open up in the Valley? And he said, I'm not opening up in the Valley. And that really shocked a lot of people. And I think you're seeing more and more a lot of people choosing to stay in their home countries. So they're choosing to stay and operate in Turkey, but have a global focus. Can you talk a little bit about and give advice to people who do want to start companies and don't want to actually be in Silicon Valley?
Sure. I think, I mean, he's partly right and he's partly not, because I mean, being in Silicon Valley definitely helps in terms of financing and marketing, building relationships with the media and stuff like that. And I mean, when I look at Group's history, I remember back in 2005, when I started it, in 2006 actually, we launched the site. I remember the first day, after it was featured on DEG, we got emails from really top investors from Silicon Valley, including Union Square Ventures, and I had correspondence with Paul Graham from Y Combinator. I mean, it was interesting times, but what happened was, since I was in Turkey, I was in Istanbul at the time, they just passed right away. I mean, right after hearing that. So, I mean, it's tough to be an entrepreneur in this region. I mean, you're not in the same both with Silicon Valley entrepreneurs. You're a little bit disadvantaged in terms of financing. But I mean, when it comes to innovation, I think it can come from anywhere. It's not necessary that you're in Silicon Valley. I mean, our technical team is in Turkey, Istanbul, and I'm Turkish. I spend quite a lot of time here, and we innovate. And there are lots of other companies who innovate outside Silicon Valley too. When you look at it, there is Skype, Spotify, all these things. Exactly, but I mean, this guy, Martin, he's a rich guy. He's an investor himself, so he doesn't need financing himself. So the things he said, maybe just his comments, maybe apply to his own situation. But I think I definitely recommend people here in this room to go to Silicon Valley and just spend maybe a week there and stay there. That's how I started. I went to I was in Princeton University for an internship, and then I just wanted to see. I had seen Silicon Valley from a National Geographic article back in 2004, and then I just wanted to see what it looks like with plain eyes. And I bought a plane ticket, and I went there and loved it. And then it was easier for me to go back there after 2006, after all the things I experienced with investors in Silicon Valley. So,
can I chime in on this point?
Absolutely.
I think one of the factors which is probably went into the Spanish entrepreneurs thinking is that plays a role is that the diaspora effect, and by diaspora I mean Turkish Americans, right? Whether or not they are coming back into this country, into their home country, and building those bridges. I'm from Pakistan originally, and I often say that Pakistani diaspora is a lot engaged in Pakistan than the Turkish diaspora is in Turkey. In fact, I often feel, with all due respect to my Turkish American friends, I'm more passionate about Turkey in the Valley than some of the Turks are passionate about Turkey in the Valley.
Not this Turkish American.
I know, you and I both, right? So my point is this, that if you look at India, or if you look at Israel, or if you look at Ireland, One of the major reasons, and also Taiwan, one of the major reasons those countries, their tech industries have taken off is because their diaspora made a commitment to come back home. Or if they didn't come back home, they were doing business actively with their home countries while they were in the valley. That's how they built it up. So the valley became more of a dynamic phenomenon. It became abstract. It went beyond its physical zip codes. And that's precisely where we want to be. That hasn't happened with Turkey. It's happening now. It's great to see, VC friends coming here. But after we saw this thing booming, not investing with all due respect as the journey was happening. So I think until that happens, it will be this temptation to go there. But I'm all for being here, for innovating from here. We are building stuff, and I'll get to talk about this in 30 minutes, from Istanbul that is world-class technology. You have incredible, incredible talent here. But if you could get the seasoned management, some execution, and get the help of folks who have had the opportunity to go abroad, get experience, and apply those skills back home, that is terrific. So I'm hesitant to, with all respect to some of my, I think Devin, your point of view, it would just, suggest that you all should just go. And somehow we'll all come out great. With some, it will be the case. With others, it's not going to be the journey. There are soft factors too, cultural factors, just the ease of place, things that you're used to. So I think if one could work with folks who have relationships abroad, and in this case, diaspora, that could be, and for that, there's a lot of responsibility for people like yourself, and others, to some extent, even myself, to invest time here and apply lessons that we are learning.
And I'll make a plug for Silicon Alley in New York because it's an upcoming place. So if you don't want to go to Silicon Valley, come to New York. I'm going to open up to questions to the audience. If you want to raise your hand, I'll come around with a microphone. Do we have any questions? You have a question? Okay. Can you tell us who you are?
I'm Taylan Demirkaya from Embryonics Incubator Center. Can you tell me what are the features of entrepreneurs in order to be in the Silicon Valley? But clearly, please, because sometimes
What are the features?
Features you're waiting. Which maybe it's the stage. I don't know that you will entrepreneurs will be approvable for Silicon Valley.
This is I'm going to make categories. I think, I agree with you. Like being where you are is actually comfortable, and you don't have to be in Silicon Valley to start with. But if you want to be there, I'm going to classify a couple of different things that you could be doing, and then you could be going there. So first of all, if you're doing a local clone of something that happens in San Francisco, never come. There is no point. You could make that business run over here, and then you can make money and everything, but that's not a kind of business you want to bring over. If you are doing something mediocre, never. I was going to add it to Dilawar's comment. If you want to stay here and become an entrepreneur, do something amazing. I think that's not that difficult. I see, I think this is the hype of clone. It's this conference. I think it's fine. You could do a clone. That's fine. But if we have 9 clones, let's have one amazing idea that the whole world can use, which is not a Foursquare, which is not Twitter, which is not Facebook, but something new. Let's look at what we need in 5 years, and let's build it today. Then come to San Francisco, you will get your money. Because that kind of product, imagine you are the Christopher Columbus and you have a mirror and you entered into a tribe, and when you show them the mirror, they want to give you all the gold they have to get the mirror. And if you can build that mirror, whatever it is, it could be a service innovation, it could be a technical innovation, it could be something. And that's what is called a startup in San Francisco. Because when Foursquare first came out, it was a mirror. It's not anymore. The group deal stuff.
Foursquare started in New York.
And it started in New York, to my surprise. To my surprise, something's happened in New York. I think the feature of an entrepreneur is, first of all, you are not afraid to go there. You are not afraid to speak to people. You can actually articulate yourself really well, like in 20 seconds, 30 seconds, 1 minute, whatever it is. You say, okay, what do you do, is the question you will get. Don't answer it in like a minute, then you're out. It doesn't matter, okay, I don't know enough English, learn it. I can't articulate well, learn it. It's another skill that you need to get. And if you are in front of an investor, make sure that you are taking as less of his time to introduce yourself and tell him what you are doing, and especially with some engagement, some traction. I started something, it is going well, it is selling well, and then it's going to go really well. If you join me, then we will do it better. So I think that's what I would say about that.
Emery, do you want to chime in at all?
I mean, it depends, I think, on your product, what you're trying to sell to the investors. If it's an international product, then I mean, I guess it's your only choice. I mean, these days we see more and more investors in Turkey as well, investing in international focused startups. But otherwise, that's your only choice. You have to be able to articulate yourself in English, and that's it. Otherwise, I mean, being an entrepreneur in Silicon Valley is just like being an entrepreneur in Turkey. I mean, entrepreneurs are entrepreneurs everywhere.
I just want to add one thing, very tactical. I think since you wanted very specific answer, to sort of going back to Emre's point, if you have a certain product or service where you feel that being in a place where you could connect with partners readily, then you should definitely consider coming, even for some time. Because you could strike partnerships, and that's just the nature of any place, not just the Valley. You go to New York for media or LA, right? You go to certain sectors, clusters, where there is just, the place is built for, there's a lot of people around on the street that you can connect with. That can really ease your way of building partnerships. So again, I don't want to pick any examples, but depending on your business, you may consider it because you have the value chain, people in that value chain all in one location. And you can spend 3 months and build some contacts, again, through your Turkish American friends, and try to penetrate that. That is very difficult to do sitting over here. And it is not because anybody's against Turkey, just the law of nature, it's a distance. So that's one reason that I would consider if you have a product that requires that kind of connectivity with the industry.
Do we have any other questions? We have a room full of people interested in entrepreneurship, and you don't have a single question about Silicon Valley. Come on, guys. I know you do. Okay, if nobody else has any questions, I have a question about, people talk about Silicon Valley, and they talk about Silicon Alps, and they talk about replicating Silicon Valley. Can Silicon Valley be replicated, and can it be replicated in a place like Turkey?
I think, I mean, I don't think it's the right question to ask. I think,
okay.
I mean, not for you, sorry. For
How dare you do that?
No, I mean, for people to. I mean, we don't have to replicate Silicon Valley. I think there's an ecosystem that's growing here. I mean, we don't have the same types of companies and everything with Silicon Valley. And I think Startup Turkey is a good beginning, and it's going really well. And we will have a vibrant startup community here as well. It doesn't have to be like Silicon Valley. It doesn't have to be stuck in a certain geography, or it doesn't have to be stuck in this university techno parks, what they call. It doesn't have to be that much supported by the government. I mean, I think ecosystems, they all have their own characteristics, and more and more entrepreneurs, successful entrepreneurs, role models come. We will see the ecosystem growing itself, and it will get its own name. I don't know. People will start copying it.
By the way, it was a great question, Limira. You asked a wonderful question. I wanted to add one thing. I think the role of academia is very, very critical. So I don't know if you can replicate the Valley, but you can certainly follow their success. Silicon Valley wouldn't be here if Stanford wasn't there. Today, 5% of Google employees are Stanford graduates. It's incredible. You just look at the role of those professors as advisors, even investors, as mentors. It's just, you can't find a place like that. I, however, am very, very encouraged when I come to Istanbul and I go and speak at, ITU or Bahçeşehir. There is incredible work going on. There are now universities, OCN certainly as well, that have that, that are spawning that kind of content and advice from academia. So I think the starting point is you have to invest in those institutions, but let's be very careful. That takes about a century or maybe 50 years to build. And good news is Turkey does have a pretty good high education system, right? And we just need to make sure that it scales up. So there's one critical ingredient is institution of higher learning that you have to invest. Without them, it's tough to have talent.
Devrim.
I want to say that it's just as easy as like you can take a seed from somewhere in the world and then bring it over somewhere else. It's not going to bear the same fruit. Like, you know, you can't have oranges in New York, even in Silicon Alley. Like, you just can't have stuff like that. And
But we can have orange juice.
yes, best ones. The thing is, Abdullah Gül came, Turkish president, came to Silicon Valley, and then he said something really nice. He said, "We don't want you guys to come back." I really like that. He's like, do it over here. Because this is where this kind of flower grows. Like if you have this worldwide, you know, business opportunity, stay here and become the next Google, become the next Facebook, and there's nothing wrong about that. And I don't think this replication is a good thing, you know, per se. Like I see also like about, again, the cloning stuff. When you clone something, it is the same thing. Can it be cloned here, even if it's a great business over there? Can it be a great business over here? You have a different climate here. You have a different set of people. You have a different set mindset. Like if you know, a food recommendation engine, we have 90% kebab shops here. Like we don't have sushi and Ethiopian and the Peruvian and all those cuisines that you have in New York. So in that case, I think that we can follow their success, and I think we have to calibrate what we want to do in Turkey. I don't believe Turkish future lies in number of startups. This is my personal opinion. Mm-hmm. We have to do great stuff, and just like 1, 2, or 3. Like we have to create these things without replicating whatever is in San Francisco, and we can do it in Turkey. I know people personally who are technically capable of creating the next product that the whole world can use, and those 3 guys can create something, and you will name it after. And that's a very important distinction too. In Silicon Valley, American government didn't come up with the idea of Silicon Valley and then said, hey, let's put this in San Francisco and it will work, right?
Well, yes, but I'm going to push back on that. I mean, there is the theory that Silicon Valley, it did occur by people defying the status quo and people breaking off, but it was because the U.S. government offered them the opportunities to actually take them on as clients. So there was an absorption. So there's a push, but there's also a pull.
Yes, there's that support. Like if your kid is really good at math, you will just, you know, prepare him for the math Olympics. You won't make him a soccer player, right? So that's you are a mom, and you're going to nurture your kid to his abilities. And I think if we create our success model, so let's create some, you know, some world phenomenon says that this is the Turkish success story, then we will call it something. Let then government support that initiative, not create it, because government creates something, it sucks. Nobody wants to be there, and nobody wants to get that. Like, I mean, in my previous company, TÜBİTAK wanted to give us some insignificant amount of money. Only filling the forms took like 8 months. I mean, in a startup life, you're already like half your lifetime. So I think let's create our own success story and then decide on who needs to support it and how to nurture that.
Did you want to say?
I just want to add one point, just for the matter of fact, that when it comes to the role of government in the U.S., actually the U.S. government has had an active role on the R&D side. I mean, Internet, in part, came out of Department of Defense. A lot of work that has been done there that was taken back into the private sector. So you look at Turkey, and I can say this, I'm not a Turkish citizen, that there's a huge amount of defense spending in this country, a big part of GDP. The question to ask is how much of that R&D can be brought into private sector, and perhaps could even help the technology industry. So the role of government is not to set up big buildings and techno parks. That's great, but that's just a small part. It is about how do you spur innovation, how do you support innovation when you have big dollars, big currency amounts. How do you invest some of that for areas where private sector can't invest? They can't spend billions of dollars in projects that may not yield anything right away. So that's where the U.S. government has been helpful. In fact, frankly, a lot of the debate right now in Washington is about when you're cutting budgets, people are concerned that you might throttle your long-term innovation, because government is no longer being able to write checks for major health breakthroughs or major technology breakthroughs. There was, by the way, a question over there. I just want to make sure we didn't miss them. You had a question,
You had a
so I'll let
question?
you, yeah.
I can come around.
Do you want to hog the microphone?
Can you tell us who you are?
Sure. I'm Burak Bayburtlu. I'm an independent tech blogger and I work for Microsoft as well. Actually, the question in my mind is like the most of us must have that. When we go to Silicon Valley and spend 1 week, let's say 1 week, where should we attend to? What is the ethos of Silicon Valley, San Francisco? What is the best networking sessions happen? Which cafes should we hang out? Where should we go? Who should we see? We can read from. Who will be? You will be the guide as well, but maybe you can tell us about that. And living in Silicon Valley, what was the most extraordinary thing you noticed when you see and say, this is where I stay because of that?
1 week is not good enough. Like nothing is going to happen in 1 week. So you got to be there at least a month, because the first 2 weeks you'll be like, oh, what a nice place, you know, what a nice food and stuff. So we will enjoy the space, and we will do that. I actually volunteer. If anybody wants to come to San Francisco, we will. I mean, there are other people that are looking at me right now. They were there. We were together in San Francisco. There is a good Turkish community, and I think that's what we should do for each other. Like, if you need to have an introduction to an investor, send me an email. If you want to come to San Francisco and if you have those questions, send me an email. Like, and send others an email. So we will actually provide that. Actually, Turkish people like to, you know, meet Turkish people and joke around and stuff. And it's cool, you know. That's something that we don't do for each other, I think, enough. But we want to. I think every Turkish person in San Francisco would love to give you a tour, or at least, you know, recommend you to, you know, the places to go. More importantly, though, if you're coming for the purposes of, okay, I want to become an entrepreneur and I want to know how it works, that needs preparation. We need to set you up with a startup. So at the moment, startup coding is on a floor where there's 83 other startups. So those are the kind of incubators. And I know 50 of them, right? Just tell me what you can do. Maybe, for example, I will just say, hey, this is a great guy from Turkey, and maybe he will, you know, help you out with such and such. And then I'll hook you up with them, and then you will work for them for 2 weeks. Just get the hang of it. And just send us emails, and, you know, we'll set up schedules.
Emre?
Thank you. Let me tell you my story again. When I went to Palo Alto first, it was just 2 weeks, really. It wasn't more. And what happened was I just spent days and nights in Starbucks. I didn't have anybody, I mean, I didn't know anybody there. It was 2005. And yeah, I spent days. And then it was all coincidence in my case. I just, you know, bought a Forbes magazine in the Walgreens. Oh yeah, yeah. In the Walgreens, from the Walgreens, and I opened it. I saw an investor, and I started Googling it, and then I found that there is a Turkish investor working in the same firm with him, and then I found this guy's phone number from a public. It's like a psycho, I know, but I found his phone number from a public index, and then I called him, and he was very friendly. This guy's name is Barış Karadoğan, and he helped me actually find my first advisor, who's Cem Sertol. So it was all coincidence, and it just actually takes instincts and guts to go there. And it doesn't. You don't have to have a specific agenda, I think, but it of course helps to have an agenda. And it, I mean, like David said, I think today, I mean, things are different. Today there's a much more vibrant Turkish community in San Francisco, so I would recommend you to make some plans before you come, and if I were you, I would go to probably a Turkish event. There's, for example, TABC, Turkish American Business Community there, which, I mean, they organize events every year. You can attend them, or they organize sometimes Saturday events. You probably better know it, you probably know it better than I do. So they organize these events. You can join them. You can look up meetup.com, and it's full of also events for programmers and stuff. So lots of opportunities today. But even if you don't have any plan, I think it's always helpful to spend some time there.
Great. Dilaver, I'm going to let you close out, and then I'm going to have the last word.
Absolutely. I totally agree. It all starts with your, connections, personal connections, and I would just make it again very tactical. You can do that even who are here, sitting, reaching out via LinkedIn to see who are the people you know in your extended network. We didn't have these tools, believe it or not, even 5 years ago. It's amazing how much you can connect right here, sitting today, even just following hashtag on Twitter, and make sure you are all prepared for that. I would say though, Barak, just to make you feel better, it is not just about you being from Turkey feeling like, what am I going to do if I go there? It is true of people even from Omaha and Oklahoma City, and with all due respect, even parts of New York, to come to the Valley and see, what do I do here? Who do I know? The Valley is unique even within the United States. So other folks, everybody goes through the same transition. Yes, they have less of an issue because of being Americans, but for most part, they have to get to know a place. And frankly, that takes a while. It is not easy. You may spend months and a year or two or even more working, figuring things out, taking a job, learning the place. That takes. So please don't look for instant gratification. Please do not. There is no such thing coming into the Valley in 2 months and then suddenly we found gold. They did that in 1849, but it doesn't happen anymore. But the experience will be all worth it. And we are certainly here to help you and happy to welcome you along with Devon and Emre if you want to come.
Great, thanks. I think, I see a last hand here, but I think, do we have time, Alan? We should wrap it up? Okay, sorry. In terms of just wrapping up, I think there's a lot of great nuggets that we got out of this panel in terms of building relationships with people on the ground, whether they're investors or fellow entrepreneurs on the ground, but then also with diaspora networks and outside. So making sure that you use those networks. Clearly keeping an open mind and going out there and trying to learn things from Silicon Valley. But I think the one thing that at least I took away from this panel is that you really do, I think it's what Erhan Bey said this morning when he opened up, and he said you have to be hungry. And I think it is a combination of being hungry to go out into Silicon Valley, but also having the courage to go out there and articulate what you want to do, because I think that really is the hallmark of success in Silicon Valley. Erhan Bey said it this morning, and I completely agree. Ideas really aren't what it is. It's about the people and the execution. And I think you'll all agree with me that all three panelists here really exemplify that today. So I would like to ask you to join me in a round of applause for their inputs. Thank you.